guys, welcome back. Andrew here with Ambient Endeavors, and today we're taking a look at the brand new stereo EQ from GFI System. It's called Enieqma. Now, over the past few weeks, I've kind of dove into the mixing side of this whole production here. I by no means am an expert or a professional level mix engineer. I've really been the beneficiary of a couple folks' generosity in terms of their skills, their tricks, their tools, their approaches. And so I'm going to start the video off just by giving a shout out and a thank you to a good friend in town here, Ben Noble, who I've spent some time with doing a EP project. He has been really invaluable in sort of giving me some tricks and tips on the mixing side of things. Also, a good friend, Mark Johnston, who, if you're watching this video and you are wanting a deeper dive or sort of an hour and a half kind of editor's cut of this pedal, you probably want to hop over to his video and see that. But he's also someone who's continued to kind of challenge and educate me in the mixing aspect of these productions. And so I have been sort of living in that world in the box, so to speak, in my DAW. Spending a lot of time using plugins like EQs and compressors, and honing my skills a little bit more with that side of things. And I've been happy with the results. Hopefully you've noticed that, maybe have heard in the mixes lately that there's a bit of a higher level of polish or clarity or whatever it might be. But for me, it's been a journey, and one that in the last month or so I've felt kind of a level up, which is exciting and really timely as we talk about this pedal. So Enieqma is a really powerful stereo EQ pedal, lots of bells and whistles and capabilities, a lot of different use cases you could dream up for this pedal. But for me, I've kind of wanted to focus on ways that if you're getting into mixing or continuing to kind of fine-tune or hone your guitar tone, and you're feeling like there's still a layer that's missing or an element of the polish and the sheen to it that isn't quite there, EQ might be the thing that you're missing. It might be a rabbit hole to go down, and I think this pedal has the potential for you to really kind of grow as you grow in your understanding of EQ and how you can use it with your guitar tone and in your mixes beyond that. I've noticed that there tend to be some kind of foundational approaches to managing guitar in the context of a mix. So if you were like me, for years and years and years, I would play guitar in my bedroom and really love the sound of it. This full, kind of warm, full-bodied, for lack of a better term, tone that has that nice, rich low end, and you get some sparkly top end, and it just sort of fills out your room, fills out the whole of your surrounding. And on occasion, I'd bring that to live situations and just feel like I got lost in the mix, that what I was contributing was just too much, that it wasn't able to be heard, that it wasn't unique or pronounced. And so as I kind of continued to understand that, I realized that a guitar's place in the mix has to be a lot more narrow than the space that it might want to take up in my room as I'm playing in the evening, or when you're just sort of playing alone on your own. That there is a pretty wide range of frequencies that guitars can produce, with all the overtones and harmonics and things up in the high end, as well as the low and low mids that can come, and to find its place in the mix where it's not competing with bass, where it's not arguing with synths or vocals or things like that. You really have to do some massaging to the tone to help it sit in its place. So that's where EQ comes in. And one thing that I've kind of been noticing in my own mixes is that you end up doing a lot of carving out and around in your guitar tracks to help them stand out and to also help them stay distinct from your other instruments and your other layers that you're writing with. So I've kind of almost developed presets in the box where I'm finding I'm doing like high pass filters around 100 hertz or 120. If the guitars are feeling too muddy, you'll kind of duck a little bit of the low mids around 200 or 300 hertz, and then depending on the sort of effects or guitar or amp you're using, you might have to do some trimming or kind of pruning or whatever the word is in the highs, the upper mids too, to kind of duck some of the harshness or bring out some of the air or chime to the track. So a lot of those things end up being really similar one track to the next because I'm using similar gear and I'm sort of wanting a similar sound. And so that's one thing where I feel like a pedal like Enieqma can really come in handy, where you can create presets to essentially give you a good starting point for fitting well in the mix live, for pruning out and kind of rounding out some of those frequencies that don't need to be heard or that just get in the way, that sort of thing. So we're going to sort of hold that kind of bit of knowledge or learning that I've picked up along the way here, knowing that it's a very elementary kind of foundational understanding of EQ and mixing with EQ and things like that, but one that I think can be really helpful if we apply it to this pedal and how you might use this pedal in your rig. So let's jump into Enieqma. Like I said, it's a pretty dense, pretty powerful pedal, and having said that, it also is a fairly easy pedal to navigate. So I'm glad that GFI spent the time and sort of the head scratching to really kind of lay out this interface and think through this workflow in a way that is fairly approachable, even for someone like me who's pretty averse to menus and to dense pedals. It's fairly quick for me to just pull up a parametric EQ and do some tweaking and get the sound and the effect that I'm wanting. So kudos to them for doing that. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't think this is going to be a deep dive, a really exhaustive look at this pedal, but more so one that kind of helps to educate you about EQ, how you could maybe use it in your workflow, on your pedal board, in your writing, in your mixing and production, if this is kind of a new thing for you. If you're someone who spent years and years in the production world, if you are a pro or semi-pro, this might be a little bit too elementary for you, and I apologize to that, but I want to hit the lane of folks that might be curious about but maybe not super knowledgeable in EQ and how to use it. So Enieqma, it's stereo in, stereo out. You have the ability to do a few different modes of EQ. So the first one, and maybe the most recognizable, is a parametric EQ, which gives you 5 different points along the frequency spectrum here to do things like shelving, high pass, low pass filters, or bell filtering. And you can adjust the gain with this first knob up here. You can adjust the Q, which is essentially the slope of the point that you are EQing, the width or narrowness to which you are applying your EQ filtering to, and then set the point with which you are adjusting, so the frequency point on the spectrum there. There's also a master volume here and a boost function that's controllable by this right foot switch. And then you have a screen here that, as we get into the sound samples and as you saw in the intro sketch, it will give you user feedback along that frequency spectrum and those frequency curves as you adjust things. So it's really, really useful and handy to have that visual representation as you're adjusting parametric EQ and any other EQ curves that you're setting here. So that's the parametric EQ. That's one I think will be most useful for my workflows here in the studio, to just kind of create some presets and some starting points to sweeten or kind of polish up guitar tones before hitting my DAW. The intro track that you heard, it was sort of an exercise too to leverage this pedal. I didn't do any post-production EQ on the guitar tracks in that tune, and I think it really sounded great. I think it came together in a way where what was coming into my DAW was already really great. It was already honed and tuned in a way that I would do it after the fact. And so it just made my mixing life a little bit easier on that end. You also have a few other options for styles of EQ. They have a simple EQ mode, which gives you a handful of different options to kind of pull up preset EQ curves. So they have a few different amp model curves, a Fender, Marshall, and Vox, to kind of give you that sort of response that you expect from those amps. There's also a tilt style EQ, which can be useful, where you set a point, a midpoint, and then you can tilt the EQ to sort of accentuate what's below it or above it. And then also a mode with a Pultec EQ, which focuses in on the mid-range frequencies. It's essentially a 3-band parametric EQ focused on or constrained to the mid-range between 200 or 300 hertz and something like 7K. And it has some predetermined frequency points there that you can adjust and tweak for the Pultec EQ. So you really have those three if you want to do a lot of your own kind of manual carving and tweaking with the parametric EQ. If you want to just pull up a simple EQ patch that you know is a good starting point, or the sound that you're going for with an amp model type thing, you got that. Or if you want to get more in the sort of like esoteric studio world and dive into that Pultec EQ for some fine tuning of the mid-range, that's an option too. The other cool thing is that under the hood here you have a few other features that are really great in terms of probably an end-of-the-line stereo enhancer. So you have a stereo expander, which adds up to 20 milliseconds of delay to the right channel of the EQ, which gives you just some added dimension, added expanse in the stereo image. Or you can choose a dimensional effect, which sort of gives you a chorusy type sound, and you can dial in the intensity of that effect too for like a subtle chorus over everything, or a more dramatic dimension style chorus there in the stereo image. So some really cool features that are under the hood here and can help as you are producing your tracks, or again finding ways for your guitar tracks to stand out and be more dynamic in your mixes. There's various routing options too. You can go stereo in, stereo out. You can go mono in, stereo out, which is how I ran it for the intro track. You can also do stereo in, mono out. And the other cool thing is you can run this pre-post if you're running with the stereo in and out. So you can actually put this EQ essentially at two different points in your signal chain. If you want to have an EQ, a mono EQ on the front end to kind of shape or tune your guitar signal coming in, then throw some effects in and then come back to the EQ before you send it off to your amp or recording interface, then you can do that too and run it sort of pre-post in a mono signal chain there, which is cool. So like I said, that's just kind of a brief overview of what you can do with this pedal, some of the features, some of the modes that you can run it in. We're going to dive into some sound samples and just kind of showcase a few of the different EQ curves that you can use, some of the different modes that I mentioned too. We're going to show you what it sounds like to add that stereo expander and the dimension effect too on the back end in the stereo track. And yeah, again, just give you a taste for some of the ways you might be able to use this in your workflow. Really, really powerful tool. I think it's one that, like I said, as you get into exploring EQ and what it can do for your rig and your specific application, it can really grow and expand with you and kind of flex to do pretty much whatever you would like it to do in the EQ world. Another thing I want to mention before we jump over to the sound samples, you can actually do dual EQ modes. So this is something that for me again is like a little bit beyond my scope, but you can essentially pair two of the modes here and create these kind of highly customized EQ curves by using multiple EQ modes. So you could sort of draft out a parametric EQ curve that you like, and then you could add in a Pultec EQ setting on top of it, kind of overlay it so that you have some more fine tuning of your mid-range or just some added nuance to your EQ curve there by utilizing two different EQ modes. So again, a really cool feature, sort of flexing and exemplifying how powerful this thing can be, and we're just going to dig into it and show you a little bit of what you could do with the Enieqma. So I'm going to be running my Jennings guitars Voyager Deluxe guitar into my pedal board. We'll go through some of the effects there that are set up, and then have this Enieqma at the very end of the chain. I've really found it useful for my workflow to have it at the end of my chain to kind of do the last polishing and refining of my signal before it goes off to my amp. And so we're going to do it that way, and it will be running in stereo onto the UA Ruby as my amp. Check it out. you.